What's going on, guys? So today is a day where I'm actually out here at the fifth wheel to fix a problem that I guess wasn't caught or identified at the factory. Now this, of all the mistakes that somebody could make, is absolutely an honest mistake, because once I identified the problem, they told me why they did it the way they did it, and we realized it just wouldn't work out. So looking up here, you can see that light above the door. Very cool looking light, very different than what you might have on your RV. That's because this specific light up here is a motion detection LED light. It's got some features built into it that's really cool. I installed something similar to that on the previous Chaparral that we had, you may remember. Well, this specific light's not working right now, and let me explain why. So hang tight, I'll be right back. All right, so this light, which is really cool, super bright, and has a lot of cool features like motion detection, which I think can add a level of security and safety whenever you're camping, hasn't been working. And the reason why it hasn't been working, I figured out pretty quick after getting the RV and attempting to use it. And it was hard to diagnose at first because of the way this light is intended to function. So the way you turn this light on, or go through the few modes that it has, one of them being motion detection, one of them being always on, and one of them being off, is by toggling your porch light switch on and off. So you toggle it on and off, and then let's say it comes on and it stays on, then you toggle it off to turn it off, you toggle it back on, then it goes into motion detection mode, and then you toggle it off again to turn it off, and you toggle it back on to come on. So you go through the various modes by simply flipping the switch on and off. And that's how the previous one I had on my Chaparral was also configured. So it's made so you can simply replace the porch light that you might currently have. Now, why isn't this working? Well, because they hardwired it into the 12-volt system, which means anytime I turn my battery disconnect switch in the basement area on, the light is technically powered on, and it goes through its cycles. Now, the reason why it was hard for me to identify that is because it actually has a photo sensor on it to determine if it's nighttime or daytime out. And I couldn't get the light to come on, period, because I'm pretty much always out here in the daytime. And the few times I've come out here to work on the RV at night, I must not have been in the right mode. Now, I know it's connected because you can see that little slot on the front to the right side, right between where the bulb would plug in and the motion detection sensor. Well, that is a little blue light that flashes whenever there's power going to it. So I know that the system's working. Unfortunately, it's just not wired in a way that'll work for me. So I'm gonna have to do something kind of interesting. Okay, so now we're inside. I hope it's not too dark. And what you're looking at here is the main control panel. The reason why they wired it that way is they figured that it was in motion detection mode all the time, and it would just come on and off whenever you walked up to the front door, which would be kind of cool, and it might actually do that. The problem is I don't want the light coming on every time a car passes me whenever I'm on the roadway, because there's 12 volts going to it. So this little area right here that's blank is where it's supposed to have a switch. And again, because it's motion detection, they figured just hardwire it in to 12 volt all the time whenever you have your power disconnect turned on, and you would be fine. So they just put a blank here. So after talking to them, we figured out what we're gonna do. I know that the wires for it are simply back here. The yellow wire, which is the 12 volt lead coming from the light, is spliced directly into 12 volt constant, which I'm gonna look at here in a second. But the ground wire is also in there, and the 12 volt wire coming from the RV battery is also back here, and everything's ready to go. I just need to put a switch in. Now, you may recall I had a problem with the switch panel on the previous Chaparral that I had, and they sent me a new switch panel. The cool thing is I can simply grab one of these switches, pop it out, and replace that switch right there. So I have the component I need. So I'm going to take this panel cover off right now, and we're going to see if indeed the wires are back there to connect to the switch I'm going to pop out of here and replace this little blank with. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is pop this little trim panel off, and it should just pop off just like this. Just be careful, because you may break one of the little tabs off if you're not careful, and I definitely don't want to do that. And then it has 6 screws holding it in place. So I'm going to take the 6 screws out real quick, and let's take a look behind here at the wires. Okay, so I got the 6 screws out. I didn't want to pull the panel out yet because I wanted you all to see what is going to confront you the minute you pull a panel like this out from an RV. It's going to be a little shocking at first, and you have to be prepared for it. Yes, that is what you're going to be looking at if you ever have to pull your panel out behind your RV. A lot of wires in here. I mean, they're everywhere. And they all function for something. So if one fails or one goes out, you are going to be confronted with fixing it in this big jumbled mess of wires. Now the nice thing is they provided plenty of slack, and that's always important. The challenge you have is there's a backing here, so you have to give yourself enough room behind these wires to actually put this panel back on without possibly bending, damaging, or shorting out a connection right here. So that's always something you have to be very careful of whenever you're working on a panel like this. Before you put it back in place and secure it, make sure nothing's binding. Make sure you're not having to use excessive force to put this in place, because the last thing you want is a connection here merging with another connection, and all of a sudden you're shorting out your slide, or you're shorting out your pump or something else. So always pay very close attention to that. Okay, so I'm going to be hunting down 3 main wires here: a yellow wire, a white wire, and a blue wire. So basically what's happening is my white wire, my constant 12-volt wire, is going to be plugged into the top of the back jack. The center one is going to be my yellow wire going to the light, and the bottom one's going to be my white wire, which is my ground wire. Why is it wired like this? Well, that's because the 12-volt constant wire coming from the battery on top only makes connection to the yellow wire to power up the light whenever it's in the center. So the wires are buried in here. Let me take a quick look at it. I'll be right back. Okay, so I've ran into a bit of an issue here, and that's the fact that this switch, even though I guess from a distance it looked the same, is too large for that hole. So the switch is the wrong size, and you can kind of tell if I take this blank and I put it next to it. Now what I've done here is I've drilled a hole through here, because the other way I could tackle this, and I bought the part just in case, I got this switch off of Amazon. It's a little toggle on and off, and it's essentially an inline switch. So I simply run power to one side and then connect the other side to the power going to the light. And I was going to tap in behind the door and just have this kind of feed like right here underneath this cover, and I could control it right here because it's easy enough for me to reach from the steps or even down in the bottom. So that's how I was planning on doing it. But again, ever since they helped me identify the wires back here, I don't need to. So instead, what I'm going to do now is I simply drilled a hole through the blank that was there. I'm going to put the blank in. I'm going to temporarily mount this switch right here using the adhesive that it comes with. It's basically double-sided tape. I'll run the wire through the hole, and then I will splice it into this wire, which is the wire that goes to the light, and after that, it'll basically do the same thing. Once I turn power on, constant power is going to be going as long as the switch either shows on or off, and it should do the same thing if I toggle the switch on and off until I can get that specific switch in place. So once I get this switch, I'm going to go ahead and wire it up, and it's already wired for it. So they got the connector back here, and they have 2 open connectors that are sealed off with heat shrink that I'll just connect directly into the switch once I get it. I just don't have the switch, so I'm going to be using this kind of temporary means of doing it. The only thing that'll make it look less cosmetically appealing is the fact you'll see a little 2-inch stretch of cable that's going to go through the hole and then into this back panel. So I'm going to go ahead and get this wired into place, and we'll put it back together and see how it works. Okay, so I've cut the wire, and I have my little splices on each side, and I have this wire going to the switch that's already stripped and ready to go. Now I'm going to confirm that there's no power going to that light, which will confirm that this is the correct wire that I cut. Now the reason why I know this was the right wire is because when I spoke to Coachman, they told me it would be this kind of an off yellow wire that's going up. It's be the only off yellow wire going up, and that's the only yellow wire going up, period. So that's got to be the wire. Now I'm going to go check to see if the little blue blinking light on the outside light is still blinking. If it is, that means I still have power and I didn't do something right. Nope, everything looks good. If there was still power right inside there, there's a blue light that would be blinking. Nothing's blinking, which means I am good to go. So I just need to go ahead and connect the wires and we should be good. Now I just need to make sure which way I'm going to connect those wires to determine which way the switch has to be on. And I want it to be up to be on, so hopefully that's what we do. Okay, so I just have one end of the wire pushed into that side, one end on the other side. I haven't locked them down yet because I want to go outside and check to see if the little blue light's blinking. Okay, so after some tinkering around, I figured out that I do have it wired the correct way with the orientation of the switch also correct, which means the straight line being on and the circle being off. Right now the light is on, as you can see. So now I'm going to go flip the switch and you'll see that the light turns off. And now the light is off. So if I flip it again, there's several modes. I got to go back through the instruction manual just to make sure I am doing all this correct as far as the mode and how many times you toggle that to switch the different mode. Okay, so now it is in motion sensing mode because you see the light flashing right here. Right there. So it looks like everything's wired up properly. Now my only thing to do is to put everything back in place. I'm gonna use a little bit of alcohol on the plastic so the adhesive sticks better, and get the panel back up and screwed into place. Okay, so I have the panel just in place and the screws loosely held there. I would gladly give up a couple inches behind this wall if it meant there was no pressure on the back of these wires. Gladly. If, you know, they had to move it in 2 inches further on the other side, so the pass-through back here would be 4 inches versus 2 or whatever it is, I would gladly do that just for the peace of mind of knowing I don't have any pressure pushing up against this wiring harness back here and possibly causing an issue. So that's something I would say they need to work in. Just find a way to get the space you need to have, you know, access behind this panel, maybe so you don't even have to remove the panel, maybe so you can get to the back of it without having to worry about the pressure against it, because you can kind of see how there's pressure on it right now. It's not a lot. I mean, I can easily push it back into place, which is how it was whenever I took the screws off. But again, it's just something to keep an eye on. It's something I would absolutely want them to do a little bit different. Now, this is where I'm going to mount the switch. Conveniently enough, they left a blank spot here. That's the perfect size for this switch that I'm going to be putting here temporarily until I can get one of these switches to put right here, and then I'll take this back off and I'll wire it in the right way. But right now, this is working exactly the same way as one of the switches here. It's actually an easier install because all I'm doing is splicing this into the line versus using connectors to connect it to the 3 prongs on the back of one of these switches. So yeah, it's temporary. It's just going to go right here. It already has the adhesive on the back. If you want a link to this, actually I'll probably put a link in the description in case you guys are hunting down switches like this. It's in the on position right now. Now it's off. And again, I'm just going to get some alcohol to wipe this down a little bit, and I'll mount it right there, and we'll be wrapped up. So I'm going to tighten the panel up. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. I know everyone likes to see me do these jobs single-handedly, so I'll put that one in first. And then I'll put this one in. Put this one. There we go. All the switches are in. You do not have to tighten them down very tight. And I wouldn't even recommend doing that, because if you strip the wood backer out back here, you have to kind of reposition it, or you have to use the other screw holes. So not exactly the best thing to do. And then this just snaps back on. Here we go. Looks good, except for this strange wire coming out, but I think we all know why. We'll put that right there and we'll be done. Very cool, huh? Anyways, let me clean that up, put that in place. When it comes to working on an RV and it comes to the different things you might have to do, you know, this is definitely something I could have taken it to a dealership and had done. I have the ability to do this. It was actually fun to do, and I get to make a video about it, so that's kind of the piece that I really enjoy, plus the fact that I get to see what's back here, so it becomes less and less intimidating when you have to work on something and you kind of know where things are. So I don't mind doing this. If you get into RVing and this is something that you don't feel you're comfortable doing, then you might have to take it to a dealership, and they might have to keep it for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, maybe even a month to do something small like this. Hopefully not, but that's sometimes what you get when you buy an RV. For me, it's not that bad. And I don't want you to think at all that I'm under any illusion that this RV is perfect, that there are no issues. There are some trim issues with how things were positioned, and I had to fix those. You can see right here on the door, this piece of trim right here is bowing out. That might actually be my fault, because I had to remove this top piece to see if the wire came down for that light, and maybe I put it back too tight. But it's definitely something I need to look a little deeper into. However, you know, that trim right there I need to put back in place, and there are tacks that hold it in place. There's some up here, there's some below it, but you know, why is this trim coming off like this? Again, it could have been something I did right here, but I didn't really put any pressure downwards to cause that. So is that just from the humidity? Is that just from, you know, it expanding, contracting because it's wood? What causes that? You know, it's definitely something I'm interested in. Also, the stairs, they're a little creaky. You know, in a $150,000 Van Lee Beacon, they weren't creaky, but maybe that's the difference in how it's attached. But when I walk up and down the stairs, I get a bit of a creaky noise, and I can fix that. I know exactly where it's coming from. It's right up against the edge right there where that light is, and it's just rubbing up against the wood. I could easily pull that off, put a piece of felt there, and it would fix that problem. I don't know if it was that way from the factory. I don't know if it's just that way because it's been sitting here right now. So there are little things that you'll run into. If you're a perfectionist, you may run into little projects that you enjoy working on, or some that just frustrate the hell out of you. But the fact is, as I discover things I don't like about this fifth wheel, I'll absolutely share them, especially if it's from a fit and finish quality perspective. I did that with the Beacon. I'll do that with this. Like little gap right here, right? They put this trim on the edge, and you can still see some of the actual carpet through there. Plus that screw is a little loose. I don't even know if it's going into anything. Check that out. See, I can pull the screw out by hand. So it's obviously not actually going into anything. I could probably put a longer screw right there and fix the problem. The rest of them are perfectly fine. I put another hook here, by the way, because now the ladder can rest in these top two hooks, and this bottom one prevents it from rocking out, which is really cool. But again, these are just things that you come to expect if you own an RV. I don't think any of this is serious. This is definitely something that was just more of a, you know, the way they wired it, thinking that was the way it should be wired versus how it needs to be wired for it to function properly. But again, this was a really, really simple install. It didn't take me very long, and this cures the problem until I get a switch to put in there. So easy enough fix for me. Anyways, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.